recap what happened at Feast of Nations and where we're moving for missions and everything like that. And so first I wanted some house cleaning type stuff, and we're going to go through kind of what we talked about last night, because some of this will be news for some of you, and some of this will be just a repeat of last night, some of the information that you got. And so first I wanted to thank everybody that was part of missions this missions month. We spread it out. It was a little bit different, but we felt like, you know what, sometimes when you put everything into a weekend, especially when life happens, it's a whirlwind. And so we tried to spread that out where people could, you know what, like, let's enjoy the process. Because that's obviously what the coffee shop is about, that journey well, and that's our heart through this thing, is that we don't want Christians to feel like, oh, we rushed through everything and then we arrived and we're like, well, what do we do now? We want you to enjoy that process of getting there, being with one another. And so that's what our missions month was about, is kind of just spreading that out, slowing down, and doing life together through missions and living missionally. And so first, this year we are going to, our theme of the year is, if she can throw that slide up, is simple. It's nothing new to the church. It is something that the church should know about, and it's the Missio Dei. Showing of hands, real quick. How many people know what the Missio Dei is? Okay, we're not gonna go into a deep dive into it, but simply, it's the heart of God. It's Latin translation for heart of God. And if we know what the heart of God is that is to reach people, to love people. We see that in the parables, right? We see that what we're talking about today. That's why this is kind of awesome how this kind of works together, tying the parables together, and missions and everything is the gospel pushing us forward. And so the Missio Dei is the heart of God, and the heart of God is to reach people, because why? He created man. Man messed up. And if we on a board last night, we want to celebrate you, because without you, there's no missions. Well, that's two things. One, if there wasn't man, there would be no there was no sin in the garden. Satan had fallen, but man had to step into sin for the problem. But then there was the mission that God sent his son to this world. And so when that was the mission, to redeem man, to bring him back to him, because in the garden he was with man, but when Jesus came and died and came back to life, he lived within us. We became that temple. And so the mission, the Missio Dei, is the heart of God, and that's what our missions is that we don't want to entertain you with all this fancy stuff and things, that we just simply want to help engage you in the heart of God. Because that doesn't specify an area, that's everywhere. The heart of God is for you to be at your job, no matter where it's at. If it's in a school, if it's in a store, if it's in an office, if it's at home with your kids. The heart of God is something that is so much bigger than what we understand. Or we can say, well, it's at church or it's over there. No, it's everywhere we are. The heart of God has a purpose for you, to be in a mission, to go places, to do things, to serve people, to love people. And so that's our drive for missions here, is how can we get you to be on mission where God has called you? Because none of us work the same job in the same place, right? I don't think we have anybody here that has a stand-in that goes to work for you sometimes. And so what that means is that you have a purpose where you're at. Some of you have a purpose furthermore, and you're supposed to step into something else. But the fact of the matter is that we have to have the heart and the mission of God, and that is to reach and love and serve people and do it together. And so that's our theme for the year. And so we talked about the theme. We went into it a little bit more and whatnot. And so today's parable we're talking about is the lost sheep. How many people heard this story? Yeah, it's a good one. And so we're gonna jump in there in a second. But before that, we talked about some trips. And so she's going to throw the first slide up there with a few of the trips that we have next year. And you'll see some information is that on one of them, on the first one, Dallas, Texas, is a youth trip. Sorry, adults, unless we need sponsors. It is a youth trip, and that trip, I have a lot of connections still, thank God, because of in college. I was there, but not a lot of people, when they go to a Christian college, leave the area of where the Christian college is. A lot of them stay because there's a reason there's colleges there, because there's a lot of churches and things going on in bigger cities. And so I have some connections, so we're going to take some youth down. We're going to do some missions trips. Dallas is a big city, but you can get country pretty quick. And so there's different areas that I have friends that are doing missions work, or they're involved in a church or on staff. And so the nice thing is that we're going to be able to keep the cost down because we can stay at the church. And so that's what we're doing for the youth. If youth camp, we're going to start fundraising and things like that starting here in December or January, rolling into that. We know Christmas is a busy time, but there's some things that we're going to do that are not weighing on you so much. And so then we'll have a free day or so. The date might fluctuate in between there because that's when the Lee Summit School District and Raymore actually has the same schedule this year as Lee Summit. And so we have some kids coming out of there, so that's kind of we picked that. Then, if you know about the Rosebud, South Dakota, here's the deal. Our missionary friends in South Dakota became fully appointed missionaries now. And so what that means is that they are required to meet certain standards, whereas first they were part-time missionaries, so they raised the money, they had what they needed, but according to the AGWM, which is Assemblies of God World Missions, they have to raise so much money, have so much money, so they're traveling to churches and places, asking people to partner with them so they can be on mission in South Dakota. Even though they were already there, they have to go through this process, and so that means they cannot receive teams. So if you were aware of last year, we could not go because this was a new thing. They didn't even really realize it, so we had to cancel our trip. So the reason why it's to be determined is because that day we have a range that we're going to be throwing in there, and the reason is because they're at 75% as of right now. They're at 75% raised of their budget, and so once they have that, then they can officially put dates. But because it is the AGWM and they're partnering with, they can't put a date out until they're fully funded, if that makes sense. And so we have the slots in which we're wanting to work this, but they can't official, and we can't say, hey, we're doing this until that is. But I do want to brag, and I shared this last night, because of what you do in missions, not just because you hear people give stories or you give money, that lives are transformed just simply through your obedience. And so South Dakota, we've had people go up there. We've had a youth trip up there. We've had different people. And how many people remember Creston Tomlin? Yeah, so Creston Tomlin comes to church and he sings. And so we believe that the fivefold ministry is not just, oh, you do yours, we'll do ours. It's about partnering together. And so because of that relationship, because we as a church are friends with missionaries and evangelists and teachers and all these things, is that because of that relationship, Creston went with us 2 years ago. And he had done other parts of work on reservations, but they had kicked him out because, simply put, is that people make money off of addiction. Whether it's alcohol, whether it's gambling, and that money goes back into where they're at. And so they benefit from people being addicted. Well, when you come and you preach the gospel of truth and life and freedom, people sober up. People stop walking into these addictions and have problems, and so they kicked him out because he was just loving people and said, hey, there's a different way. You don't have to be this way. You can have this. And so they said, you can't come back here. And so he partnered with us, and we went up there, and his heart was just turned for what the missionaries were doing there, Johnny and Heidi. And so he's like, you know what, I'm going to churches, and I'm going to share this. And so he went to a church in Paris, Texas, and they have three my mind just went blank, contractors in that church. And they're like, dude, we can help out. There's things. And so what happened is those contractors and other men went up to South Dakota, and they did $40,000 to $60,000 worth of work for free. The church was leaking. I don't know if you know, but when you have a home issue and somebody says, oh, it's going to be $40,000 to $60,000, you're like, oh yeah, do you want that in ones, tens, or fives? Like you don't just have that money laying around. It's a big deal. And so here they are with this problem. And what often they do is that they just don't do anything with it. They're like, well, we just can't fix it. Because to temporarily do it doesn't actually fix it, and to actually do it's going to cost more than what you can afford to get into. And so they were just there, and mold was taking place in this bottom room, and the wall was rotting and all these problems. And so these guys came in with these excavators and they ripped the ground out. They repaired walls. They put drains in and did all this work in a week's time. And they said, we're just blessing you because we want what you're doing here to change lives. And so the reason why I'm sharing that information is this, is that you didn't have to give $1 to that, but you gave your time. You gave your prayer. You gave your obedience in what you've done because of what you pledged here that activated other people, because God's like, oh, well, so Church on the Rock is being faithful. They're doing what they're supposed to. They're giving their monthly pledges and prayers, and they're loving people and working as the fivefold ministry. So there's another church over here. Wait, we can connect these, and we can do something bigger than one church can do. And so because of you and your obedience, we just want to thank you and celebrate that. And so that information will be coming out as soon as they get with us and say, hey, we're doing this, and we're talking to them regularly so that everything's back and forth so we understand what's going on, where they're at, and whatnot. And then lastly, lastly, we want, before she puts us up there, just this idea is that we know that some of you want to go on missions trips. And so what our goal is as a church and our missions department is within the next 5 years, we want everybody in this church to be on a missions trip. Whether that's you've been on one before or whether you've never been on one. Whether that's locally here in this city, this state, this country, or around the world. We want everybody. It's not because like, oh, we want you to say you've been on a trip, stamped your passport. We want you to have an encounter with God in a way that you never had. And sometimes happening to be obedient and set aside the time and the finances and everything will open this space in your life where God can activate things that you never knew were inside of you. And so with that, we want to forecast and give you some time to think because we knew things take time and things take money. And so with the next trip that we're going to be announcing is 2021, and she can throw that slide up there. It's not necessarily a missions trip. However, we believe that once you've been to Israel, it transforms the way you read the Bible. It transforms the way you talk about God. It transforms the way that you hear God. Because you're seeing where things happen and where things take place. You're reading the Bible. Oh, wait a second. This is where this happened. I always had this romantic vision of how this happened or where this happened. That's the Sea of Galilee. You know, you're going through and you're seeing these things and having these encounters. And so we want you guys to go and be. I've never been. My grandpa's been. My father's been. A lot of people I've been talking to as we've been doing the research and the legwork have been, and they're saying, "Man, you have to go." And it's gonna change your life. It's gonna change the people in your church's life. And so we know it takes time. And so that trip is projected for 2021 in January or February because that is the cheapest time of year to go. Just being transparent with you, there's trips anywhere from $5,500 to to $7,000-8,000, and the one that we've got is with a company that's been there for a long time, and they're roughly currently telling us it's about $3,000, and so we know that costs money. But that's your flights, that's your stay, that's your food, and things like that. And the thing is that they I guess don't have cheap places to stay because, like I mentioned last night, they're 5-star, 4-star hotels. For whatever reason, they do it up over there in Israel, and so there's cost to it. But we wanted to put that out there, and so there'll be more information coming out to you, so that way you have it. But the thing is that this is going to be an incredible trip, and we want you to go with us. And this is the start. And as I said, the first 2 trips might not seem so glamorous, but we're laying a foundation for something bigger here. And we believe that to do that, we have to start somewhere. And then stepping into 2021, what better place to do that and laying that foundation than transforming the way you see the Bible, the way you have an interaction with God and what's going on. And then that way, when you're living, you're like, man, this is so different now. And so that's why Israel's a big one for us. But before we get started, let's pray. God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love for us. We thank you that you sent your son to die for us, that we can be in this place freely worshiping you, God, that you care to show up and be here, that we're not just here doing something out of ritual or circumstance, but because we love you, because we want to be where you are. We thank you for this day and the hearts that you're going to speak to. We thank you for the life that you're speaking into people, the healings that are taking place in people's lives, just as they sit here or they listen, God, whatever it is that, God, you're moving. And help us to put ourselves right in the path of where you move. Not to the side or behind or where you've already been, God, but where you're going. And I thank you that in this place today we can be there together. In Jesus' name, amen. So we asked and we talked about the parable of the lost sheep. And it's a cool thing because the lost sheep is a parable amongst others. And before that parable, it talks about the cost of discipleship. And it also talks about salt without saltiness is worthless. And then it goes into some other things after Luke 15. She can go ahead and put Luke 15, 1-7 up there. And that's the parable that we're going to be in today. And we have some stuff up here just to help us be visual. And so we're going to read this first. And now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. "What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost.' Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance." And so Jesus is telling these stories because why stories relate to people better. You know, most people don't like to go to school and just sit there and people just throw facts at you and you're like, what? Why? But if you hear a story, you can kind of get into it. You're this way. You are this way a lot. How many people romanticize things? You don't have to raise your hand, but you romanticize things. Believe it or not, men don't want to admit it, but they do, right? Men do it differently. Girls do it generally growing up about movies. They're like, oh, it's so whimsical. It's so pretty. It's lights. It's food. It's smells. It's dances. It's dresses. And they kind of get into this whims of things. And guys are like, so? That's dumb. And guys do the same thing. They start watching a war movie. And they start watching Gladiator. And they're like, I'm Maximus. You know, I jack some dudes up. You know, my kid's hurt. I'm going to go mess somebody up. Don't talk to me that, you know, you start getting this, whatever. And men do it. We start thinking, man, if something happened, you know, this is what I would do. And I would act like this, or I would be here. And we start to think things in our head like, yeah, I'm cool. Right? We romanticize things and don't even think about it. We do it all the time with military stuff, guys. And so what happens here is that when people hear stories, they can get into it and they're like, oh, well, maybe. But sometimes when you have visuals, it also helps. And so I don't know if you're familiar with sheep, but sheep are all over the Bible. They're Old Testament, they're New Testament. Jesus talks about them, people talk about them, people work with them. Sheep were a big deal because the most often sacrificed thing from Israel were sheep. They used the sheep for clothing. You know, they used all of these sheep. They're everywhere. They numbered the fields, and then they talk about them in terms of saved people and lost people. You know, like it's like, oh, well, you're just a sheep. And it's like, whoa, that's offensive. And, you know, but that's the reality. They're talking about this because why? They use sheep because that's what was around. That's the currency, right? It would be equivalent to us talking about something if we're talking a scenario like, well, do you remember that time on the football field? Or do you remember at this? And we start laying things out. And that's the same what Jesus is doing here for these people. And so here's how this ties into missions is that lost people are the one sheep. I kind of got this shirt. And it says, leave the 99. And it says, find the one. Stop for the one. That's what I said. What'd you say? And so it says, stop for the one. And if we think about this, how busy do we get because we have the 99? Here's a real life scenario for me. Many of people have walked into me or pushed me or kicked me because I see a penny on the ground and I always stop and pick it up. Was it heads up? I don't care. It's a penny. Right? I pick it up. Like, I'm not picking up a penny because I'm getting fortune from a penny. Like, I'm picking it up because it's a penny and I want the penny. Right? I feel like, well, I can do something with 100 of those as $1. Like, you know, dollars add up. I can get a McChicken with that. I can do something. Gas, you know, I'm starting to put that towards gas. You know, you get married and you're like, you know, I'm going to save some money and do this over here. So pennies really help out. But people are always walking in and be like, dude, don't stop in front of me because you want a penny. Right? And so there's these things, and we don't really think about it. But when something matters to you, it doesn't matter if it's all or one, because think about a kid. You make fun of kids, and you spank a kid's bottom because they're selfish. And they're like, they've got all these toys in this pile of toys over here, and there's a kid over here. It's like, I want that one. And the kid's not even playing with it, and the kid's like, no, it's mine. And you're like, you can share a toy. No, I can't. And you're like, I'm going to have to whoop your bottom if you can't share. No, it's mine. I don't care. You can whip me. I want it. And it's like the kid's like nothing. And we do the same thing. See, it's a little different in how we view this and how we do this because we forget that life originally was in a garden. You might have your nook in a garden, but you couldn't set up the dresser over here. You didn't have the shower area over here. There's like the river over there. Like, you know, I'm going to shower over here today. There's an alligator over there. I'm going to go over here today. You know, things are moving around for you. Life was on the move. You had to go. You couldn't eat from the same tree all the time like you would a fridge. Oh, just open to the store. There was just always food at the store. You know, ask people out in California right now about the food on the shelves. They can't just go to the store and always get food from the same place because why? Circumstances change. And so here we in our Christian life, we set up camp and we get to this place where like, you know what, I'm comfortable here. It's all right. And we start weighing the cost and we're like, you know, I'm good here. I'm all right. You know, we don't think about this because there's not many farmers in this church. But if a guy has a herd of cattle and lightning strikes the field and he has 500 cattle and he loses 5, you're like, oh man, but you still got 495. And he's like, that's my retirement. That's my salary. Yeah, but man, it's 4 or 5. It's even 1. Who cares? That feeds my family. That 1 was for my family this year because I need all the money from the drought last year. And so we don't really understand some of this because we're blessed. And this is not a shaming message or anything like that. This is because I want us to understand something, that we are a certain way because things happen a certain way and things are done a certain way. But that means we have to get ourselves to a place where we can still hear God the way we need to hear him. And sometimes that means removing ourselves from the luxuries and the things that we have in life to put ourselves in a place where God can say, I need to talk to you. I mean, think about this. When you have an important conversation or situation going on, you probably don't just talk about it in front of everybody. You're like, hey, can we talk over here? I want to make this a little more intimate, a little bit more respectful a conversation. But in our Christian life, we're like, God, just throw it in the mix here. You know, we've got a casserole or whatever this thing is. Just throw it in there. Like, you know, throw some of that Jesus in that dish, and we'll be fine. But what Jesus does is different. He's like, I have 99. I'm going after the 1. But what we do, and so we got a little, like I said, I like to use visuals. We use visuals. So I have a camp set up. I love to camp. I love to be outside. And so we'll use visual. I'd use my wife's bag because mine's got too much stuff in it. So this is her backpack. So if we say we're going to go and we're going to go find a sheep, it means a few different things, right? Bear with me. It means a few different things. It means, you know what? I've got to take some things into consideration, what's going on. It means I've got to kind of understand where my flock is. I have to kind of understand maybe where that sheep went. I have to take some things into consideration because how I go about this is going to be different, right? If I'm saying, you know what, I'm at the house, I saw the sheep come over the hill, I only counted 99, I think that one's on the back side. I'm probably just going to pick up my staff or whatever I need and go get it, right? Because I know where it's at. It's right there. I can do this. But sometimes, because sheep are sheep, and if you've ever seen a sheep in some of those sheep videos, like you see this hole that disappears into nowhere in Ireland for whatever reason, they have holes like that. And all of a sudden, like there's this guy who's like sticking half his body in a hole, and he grabs the sheep and he pulls him out. And it's like, how did that thing get in there? And why is it in there? And that guy had to go fetch it out. And people are like, sometimes Jesus has to get me out like this. And they're just saying, because we get in places and situations like, that is the stupidest thing. I don't even understand why that's going on. But we forget that we're humans and things go on. And so what happens is we've set up camp. We've made home, and we're like, you know what? This is what I'm doing. This is what God's called me to. This is the direction I'm moving. You know what? I don't know where that sheep is. I don't know how long I'm going to be gone. So there's some things that I really like here. I'm going to take them with me. So we start to pack our bag of what we need in life. Life, it can be different things. I don't know what it is because each person's different, right? What you need to go to work. Some of you want to take work and you want to take your problems and vent them onto people instead of be salt and light. And you want to gossip about your own situations. You're like, I'm packing things in here. You know what? I might need a rope. I might need to go. You don't even know what's on the other side. I need this rope. But why? You're in the city. Where are you going with a rope? I don't know. But you know what? I read in a magazine one time. I need rope. I can get it in here. So we stuff some things in there, and we get things going. Like, you know what? I don't know how long I'll be gone, but I get thirsty. I've got this condition that I need water. It's called I'm a human. So I'll put this in here. But you know what? I don't know if I'll run out of water. So I'm going to get a water filter because I also don't know how long or where I get water from. And then we just start thinking, you know, I might get hungry. I don't have any food in here, but I might kill something and eat it. And so we start throwing things in here, and we start getting everything. We get our bag packed, and we're like, you know what? I didn't map this trip out, but I might need some more food. I've got my sleeping mat here already attached to the back of my bag. Oh, wait. Just in case we run out of water. And then we start getting things. You know, if you use the bathroom, you're supposed to bury it. I've also got my machete. Sometimes cows attack people if you've never seen it. And then if we get really far out there, I might need to set up camp. My tent, my home's here, so I'll just take my sleeping bag. And so here we're going, and we're thinking we're going to do life, and we're going to go find our sheep. But how are you going to carry that sheep back? I don't even know what the situation is. I don't know what it is. And all I knew is that my sheep is gone and I want it, right? That's all I know. I was like, there was 99. I really sheep. Let's go find that sheep. And we're just looking in places, and we're going through places. And we can walk around places, and we can go. And it's like, sometimes we encounter people, and we're going in here, and we're walking through and finding things, and we're like, you know what, God needs to do this. Sorry, guys, I'm just sorry. People look at your life, and they're like, what is this guy? What is he doing? You know what? Oh, you know what? Hold on. I think. Can you hold this? Thanks. You're on the mission now. I think I lost a coin here sometime. What? There it is. Found a coin. Thanks, Delbert. You're keeping it warm. So we found a coin. We get a little distracted. Things change. You know what? Some things I don't want water. I want Starbucks. I'm just going to leave this here. Going back over here, and we just start going through life, and we're struggling, and we're walking through life, and we're on mission, and we're just trying to find this sheep, and we're just not having any luck, and life's going on, and we're just going back, and we're just wasting time, right? We don't know what we're doing, but we're carrying all this stuff, all this weight, all this hurt, all these issues, and we just don't really know what's going on. You're like, man, I've not slept in days. I don't need a sleeping bag. Finding a sheep. I've not even used the bathroom, I'm just so busy I can't even think. I've not eaten, that's why, evidently. So I don't know, I'm going to set this here. I'm going to think about this, because you know what? When we have this revelation from God, we realize that sometimes we just don't need some things. When we start to look at our budget, when we start to look how we spend our time or how we use our talents, we're like, man, that wasn't working. Life was dull, it was boring, there was no purpose. I didn't even use it. I want to I keep it. But then something exciting comes out and happens in our life. Yeah, I didn't use that. But you know what? This is how dumb sometimes we can be. Like, I don't even know what I'm going to use it for, but here, I got a pumpkin. I don't know what it is in your life that's just like this flashing light for you. Sometimes you're like, I don't even know why, but I'm going to carry this thing around as my pumpkin. Like, right? Like, it might be like a shoe addiction or whatever, and you don't realize what it is. You're like, but, I want to find this sheep, but I've got this really cool pumpkin. It's festive. I found this upstairs, by the way. I don't know why it was upstairs. So we were like, let's just use it. Anyway, so we're going around like, I don't even know. But the sheep, I just really want to know where it's at. I kind of looked. I was too busy not able to look because I was too busy having stuff. Sometimes that stuff can be in the form of relationships. Sometimes that form that can be in the form of working too much. Sometimes that can be in the form of just busying our time, drowning out the noise. Sometimes that stuff can be and not spending time in the Word of God. Sometimes that can be in the abstinence of community. But I have a pumpkin. And people are like, yeah, that's so dumb. Like, I don't know why that guy, like, he's like, it's like, but he has, and he's happy, I guess. There's no explanation for it. That guy just I guess God gave him that thing. And at some point in Revelation, he needs somebody like, dude, that pumpkin is so dumb. Like, I love you, but you look ridiculous. Like, you're just carrying a pumpkin. Like, what is it doing? Well, what if the sheep wants to eat? I don't think they eat pumpkins. He goes, well, what if I don't think you eat raw pumpkins. He says, what if I want to entertain myself? I don't think you have time for that if you're looking for a sheep, because when it really matters, you forget some things. Like think about this. How many people have children in here? Can I, showing of hands, this is not going to trick you. Okay, if your kid is out of town and you're not around your kid, and your kid calls with an emergency, or better yet, your kid is not responsive and they cannot call you for an emergency because something severely has happened. I don't know if they fell off the side of a cliff, or if they got hit by a car, or whatever, or they were allergic to something and something could not happen. If somebody gets on, you say, your kid is in dire situation, we need help, and you're like, but we need some decisions. And how many people just go, you know what, man, that's a tough thing. I'm gonna just sit down and think about this. I'm gonna hold my pumpkin. I love my kid, but this pumpkin is really helpful. We're just going to sit here and do nothing. I think they're going to be fine, but the doctor said they're probably going to die. But I have a pumpkin, and I have all this stuff in the house or around my life that really doesn't matter in these situations. But I can touch them, I can hold them, I can dust them off. And we don't really think about it that way because we're so comfortable. We're like, this is great. Look at my stuff compared to yours. My junk pile's bigger than yours. I have a special shelf for my junk and a drawer. But when my kid's in danger or something's happening, none of that junk matters, right? What do you say? Say, oh, I don't. You need help? Well, I'm getting in the car. Well, you're far away. Well, I'm getting on a plane, but I need something to maybe help me. And often you see in the Bible, it's thy rod and thy staff, because why? Sometimes when you're in pursuit of something, you have to fend some things off. And if you have to fend things off, you can't have a bunch of crap on your back. You can't have a bunch of stuff. If you notice and you see in the gospel when Jesus talks to people and he goes to the disciples, he doesn't say, hey, grab your boat and your fishing nets and follow me. No, what he says is he goes, come follow me. And they're like, oh. Okay, and they lay everything down, and he goes, I'm going to make you fishers of men. I wish in the Bible they would have put after that. And he goes, what do we need to use to fish for that? Like because it's like I'm not really, but we're following you. But in our faith, in our life, we get settled after we get saved, and there's a problem with that. It's because we set up camp and we forget that the mission, the heart of God, is still very important. And if it wasn't important, then they wouldn't talk about sheep all the time. And so when you realize that and you have this revelation and God speaks to your heart, then all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't have enough money for that, but I'll find it. Let me call somebody so we can get over there. Help my kid. You'll call somebody else. Hey, I'm not close, but you're close. Can you get there? My kid is in emergency. I don't care what it takes. You'll call the government. And you're like, I hate the government or whatever you want to say, but I need you right now, because people have different opinions about things. They're like, but so whatever you do, you're ready to friend with your enemy sometimes in life to get the mission accomplished so your kid's safe. And that's what Jesus is trying to share in the story. He's trying to help you to see that all that stuff doesn't matter. You have 99, but one still matters. And so you throw that down. We weren't successful in finding that sheep, but you can move a little freer and you can move around. You can find things. People touch you or trying to come. You're fighting them off and you're like, you know what? We need to find this. But you know what's cool is that sometimes you can get help. And so you're looking around. You're like, oh, I need somebody. Peter, help me. Can you look over there for my sheep? And he can help because why? Because I'm not busy. Hey, will you hold this for me? Whenever I was trying to find a coin, I had people hold my stuff. But now it's not them holding my stuff. It's helping me with the mission. A lot of times in life, we get busy wanting people to help us with our mission instead of God's. And what that is that we weigh other people down with our issues. We weigh other people down with our feelings and our problems. And instead of like, you know what? There's a bigger thing going on and God's doing it. Will you help me? And so what happens is he can look over there. And what happens if you look at this room, there's 4 sections. And if he can take a fourth, that means I only have 3/4 left if you're not good at math. And if I have somebody else check this section, we're all looking around and we're finding this and we're talking to people and I can run, I can go faster and I can find things. And you know what? Sometimes we have to go to the ends of the earth, the farthest reaches of the earth. And sometimes we can't have anything holding us down or keeping us back. But what we can come back with is one sheep. Like, you know what? You spent $20,000 and you found one stupid sheep, but I found one. And how this relates is important because why? It goes back into that story about the with Creston and them. This is a great sheep stand. See, that pumpkin was useful. We do justify things like that, by the way. We're like, see, it worked. We needed it. 20 years of having it, 1 day of using it. Perfect. And so here's where we come with it, and we walk into that. And the cool thing is that we see this happening, and like that story with Creston. It happens with like in Haiti, where a woman is having she's having a baby, and the baby's wanting to come out, and there's cords wrapped around its neck, and nobody in Haiti can do the surgery or anything about it. Where you can contact people, and say, I don't know what we're going to do, but well, there's a pilot over here. He flies people. People have to pay, so surely somebody that pays has some money. We can contact some doctors, and they fly them to Miami to have an emergency surgery so one baby can live. That bill, in American terms, if you had insurance and all of that stuff, is higher than the worth probably of what some people would deem a birth to be worth, but not God. God doesn't put money amounts on souls. And sometimes that's a sacrifice of a life to reach others. And how is that possible? We see Jesus did it. He goes, this is going to be terrible. He's in the garden and he's praying and he's in this garden. And he says, God, I don't really want this to happen, but if it's your will. And I think that's where we miss it sometimes. We weigh the odds, we see the stuff, we see the situation, and then we don't come back to, but God, if it's your will. But here's what God does. He goes, it is my will sometimes. It is my will. And so I'm going to need you to do this. You're like, man, God's never spoke before, and he did so clearly. Dang it, why did it have to be about this? Why did it have to be about this? Because I know I'm going to have to go here. I'm going to have to do this. And I'm going to do this. And he says, but he says in his word, I'm going to comfort you, thy rod and thy staff. Because what he leads us to is always perfect, is always good. But it's not always easy. This is easy. If we just set up here and we hire some people to watch our sheep so that doesn't happen, that's easy. But we forget that sometimes that this is about exploring and going and being a follower of Christ with the heart of God. I think we miscalculate when he says, I send my son. He's talking about sending his son. We miscalculate that one life is still a life for all. But there was no other person, no other way that one person could die for humanity for all. There's no other equation that works out. There's no other way or money to give. And so when he talks about this, he talks about let's rejoice. When was the last time that somebody got saved? You're like, dude, that's so freaking awesome. I'm so excited. People's like, dude, calm down. What's going on? No, I'm so excited for you. Like, you don't even understand. But what happened to me is like, dude, you're freaking me out. Yeah, but you understand. You're about to freak out if you know what your life's going to be. We're just like, fill out a card, bro. That's awesome. Fill out the card. Right? Like, we get excited with fill out the card because we forget how awesome this thing of life following God is. We forget that it's about throwing it off, and you see this in the story of the prodigal son. The father runs to the son because he's excited about the decision. He knew what his son did and the problems that he had because I don't care, this one's back. I've had this son at home. He's been here, but this one's back. And so we have to get excited about the one. We have to get excited about the workplace. Well, my job sucks. Yeah, but God put you there to get excited about reaching the one and however you got to do it. So that might mean you might make amends with people at your job. That might mean you have to invest your time a little differently. Show up a little earlier. Bring donuts sometime. I don't know what it is, but God wants to do things in your workplaces because why? That's your life. What you do here matters, but this isn't all that matters. What you do here is confirmed by how you live out there. And so we can romanticize it just like we do in the movies. Just like we do in the movies. I would save people. I'd run over that hill. I'd get shot. I'm like, I still love you. I'm going to save you. And we start, I lost an arm. And you just keep going. You're the Monty Python where you just lose arms and you're like, I'm going to fight you and do all these things. But yet it's a romantic thing. It's not actual. And what Jesus says, he goes, follow me. And then he shows them what to do. Lay down his life. And laying down your life isn't just physically, I'm going to take a bullet for you. Sometimes that means I'm going to sacrifice how I feel. I'm going to sacrifice my schedule. I'm going to sacrifice my finance. I'm going to do these things because why? One sheep is greater than what I can consume just for myself. It's amazing that when you have a situation with your kid, going back to your kid, you might skip meals, you might skip sleep, you might skip things because it matters because that's your kid. But for souls that might get in that car and go home, I mean, think about when you ever worried about somebody so much like you would your own kid. No, I see this situation going on here at the food court. What's going on here? No, they can't get in that car. Man, look, I just want to tell you, I don't know who you are, but God loves you. And you have these conversations with places because why? People and souls and sheep matter. But because we get in life and we can just cruise and we can change channels, we can set our life up where it doesn't matter so much. Because we drowned out what God's saying and doing in our heart with the stuff that we surround ourselves with. And at some point, this is the sad reality as I finish with this before we have a response. At some point, when we know what God wants us to do, and we've been so unresponsive for so long, that we step up because we hear a sheep is lost or something's going on, but all of our stuff knocks us down. And we're like, man, I'm just facing too much right now. And God's like, the call is still the call no matter what you have in front of you. Whether that's you were called when you were young or whether that's you were called and then you turned your back, God has called you, and that call is still the call. It's us that have to get ourselves to this place where it's awakened within us. David speaks to his soul. After his families and people are taken, he goes, soul, get up. We've cried enough. This is it. We're going to get our families back. We're going to do something about it. We're going to get our sheep. Those are ours. They become passionate about it. Sometimes in worship, you have to speak to yourself and say, yeah, you know what? I'm going to get excited about it. If I get excited about worship and what God's doing, then somebody else will. I don't care what their response is. I'm going to be excited about this because that's what God's doing in me. And so what it takes is some personal responsibility in every aspect of our life. And the problem with it is a lot of times is that it's like, man, I have no other choice. I'm going to celebrate. I don't care. Well, you got really bad news. Yeah. But what is my other option? Be sad with you all day, all week, all month, all life? Well, there's a time, don't get me wrong, there's a time to mourn and there's a time to have problems. We just lost a dog a couple weeks back after we got married. And there was a day for me, I handle it different, right? There was a day for me like, man, that's a bum. I cried a little bit. It wasn't my dog. I cried a little bit. I'm like, okay, we're done. And then guys just move on a lot of times for some things. But my wife struggled with it a little bit longer. But I let that process go because I'm like, yeah, people need to heal. But at some point, it's like, no, we're stopping. And I'm going to share this part. Sorry, babe. We're laying in bed last night, and she's looking online. And she's like, oh, I think I'm going to get socks with my dog on them and a blanket. And I'm like, no. It just came out of my mouth. I didn't even think. And she's like, I want to remember my dog. I don't even know. And after I thought, I was like, uh-oh. And so she said, I just think about getting socks. And I said, no. I said, it's enough. And I was like done with the conversation because, and it wasn't being rude. It was just like, yeah, that's a sad thing. But there's seasons in life. And sometimes we have to know that it's time for that season to be over. And sometimes we have to walk out of that season. Sometimes that season ends and we just hold on to it, we cling to it. Other times like, yeah, it's finished up, let's go. We got to keep moving. And so that is mourning. And so I'm not being insensitive or desensitive to what people feel because I've experienced it. I've experienced death in situations. But the reality is that sometimes we hold things too long where God can't lead us into other places. Because again, he's not dragging us, he's calling us. The heart of God is always calling us and calling for people. And we see that when he goes, hey, come follow me. He's calling, hey, come follow me, or we're following you. And when sheep cry out, it's an awesome thing, right? But who gets in the way? We do. When sheep are crying out because of hurt, who gets in the way? We do. Just because it's not what it may look like or we want it to look like or feel like. And we're like, you know what? God's doing something bigger than me and how I feel. I'm going to follow it. I'm going to give it. Whatever it is, I'm going to set myself up where God can do it. And sometimes that stretches our wallet. Sometimes it stretches our sleep schedule. Sometimes it stretches our friendships or tolerances or wherever we got to do because God's like, you know what? I'm God and I understand the plan. I'm infinite and you're finite. And he's leading us. And so as I'm finishing this up, and I'm going to say this, is she's going to throw the last slide up there. Is that the reality is for us, and this is not a woe is me story. This is something we do every year. We don't like asking for money all the time, but we do realize that money helps people do what they need to do to follow, to reach people in other parts of the world. And so each year we take up missions pledges. And simply what a pledge is this is what you pledge. This is between you and God. It's a personal thing, but it shouldn't be private because, like, you know, I'm giving to God and I want it. It doesn't mean you wave it in people's faces. That's not what we're saying either. But it should be a celebrated thing. Because why? You're dedicating to go above and beyond your tithe to give for people. But missions is not just about giving, because here's why. Is that in a moment, we're going to have you come forward, and because I believe that this is making a conscious, we're not judging you. You can come forward and not fill the card out yet and pray about it. That's fine. But we want you to come to receive your card. We want you to come and get your card. I'll pick my junk up so you don't trip, but we'll grab your card. There's a marker if you do want, and what you do is write your name and the amount, whether that's weekly or monthly, what you to give. But here's the deal, is that we're going to take minutes. Rick's going to play a song or so, and we're going to take some moments because I don't want you just to write down an amount. I want you to make a decision because the decision comes from you have to be responsible. We all want to give $1 million, but not all of us got cash laying around like that. We all want to give a little amount because, like, you know, it doesn't hurt us. But sometimes God's like, you know what, a little bit, it stretches you. So this is not the amount. This is the obedience, period. That's it. And what happens is that we give money and monthly or weekly. My wife and I do this as well, and we're filling out a card, and we give. And then what happens, that money comes into a pool, and then each month that money goes out to the missionaries and organizations we do. And if you're not familiar with what we do, we sponsor, since we've lost a few missionaries that came off the field, it was tough. Multiple reasons. They didn't have funding, or they just couldn't handle missions anymore. And so we lost a few this year. And just being honest, let me tell you this. Some people left the missions field and took over a church because it was easier in America. I just want some of that to sink in for you and realize that what we do is tough, and that this money doesn't just go so we can say we gave it or we did it. We're responsible with every dollar. We contact missionaries and we talk to people, hey, what's going on? What's this? And it's not because we're trying to hound people, but because we want to be good stewards. What we give to, we want to give. And that's why we support it. It's not just, hey, you give. It's what we do. And sometimes we get to go and spend time with them on a missions field. Sometimes they get to come and be here. And other times they're in places that you can't go or we can't go. And so we can only pray or we can only send money or whatever the situation is. And so this is not a please like, oh, give us. This is look, we're already doing this because of what you've done. And other things are happening because of what you've done. And to continue that and to move that forward, the reality is that we have to continue to go. And so we renew our pledges every year. Some people up there, some people have to adjust it because life has happened. We get it. But we want you to be obedient regardless of what that is. And so that's what we're going to do in a second. We're going to take this and we're going to pray. So if that's you and you're like, you know what, God's already spoke to me, I've been praying about it, would you just write that on the card and we're going to take that and at the door and you walk out. But here's the cool thing. On the back side, I want you to write your address. If we don't have it at the church, you're like, you know, I'm kind of new, I don't think they have it. We want you to write it because we're taking this card. We just have to record for our purposes so we know that we're covered every month. Because we pledge these people, unless you die or you quit, you get the money. Because we believe in what you're doing for the life of their missions, of what they're doing. And we give this monthly, not because it's the pat on our back, but it's because why? Because when we believe people have better things to do than worry about their monthly pledge coming in. Some of them are facing bullets. Some of them are facing earthquakes and messes and situations. Some of them are facing things that we can't even comprehend, can't have Bibles. And so when they have to look, oh, we're out of money, we don't have people aren't supporting us. We said, look, you never have to worry about us. Because we believe that when we are obedient to God, we just do it. He calls, we move. Nothing. And we're the ones that get in the way because we start thinking about it. Think about this story as we're tying this last. When Jesus called people, Jesus didn't give a list or an explanation or itinerary. He just said, hey, follow me. And they're like, okay. But it's us that get in the way. Well, what am I going to need for toilet paper? What am I going to need? Do I have a towel? I love Q-tips. Can I get a couple of those, Jesus, when we're on the road to clean those ears out? It's desert out here. We start thinking about what ifs and things that are getting in the way. Not Jesus. Jesus calls for obedience. That's it. And not excuse. And so we want to make a conscious. So he's going to start this song. It's going to stop. And I want you to take your time. And the reality is that you're going to come up. If you feel like you're going to fill it out. Put your address on the back because we're just going to record the amounts this week. And then we're going to be mailing this back to you. So you can put it on your fridge. So you can put it wherever you need to remind you and you can pray. Because it's not just about giving money, it's about giving your prayer. Because sometimes if you wake up in the middle of the night and you feel God speaking something to you, what you're praying in the Spirit's doing on something on the other side of the world. And I've shared stories of this before, and I'm not going to give a bunch of stories, but God's moving on your behalf on what you're praying and touching people's lives around the world. It could be a child that's saved from danger because of your prayer. It could be a family or whatever the situation is, simply because sometimes you were obedient, you see that, and you're like, you know, I'm going to pray. And so as you pray about it. If you feel like, you know what, me and my wife or whatever, I need to discuss this or I need to look at the budget, take that with you, but bring it back. And then we'll mail it out to you. But the reality is that we know that we don't want you to make a half-hearted decision. Because with God, it's all or nothing. And some of you, it's going to stretch you. Some of you, you've already got this, like I said. And so God's been speaking to you. Number of silver Sharpies. And if you have something that shows up, that's fine. And you can write it. If you want to spend time praying here in the middle, my dad's going to come up after that and finish everything out. But what we're going to do is that you can spend time praying over it with your family. God, show us the way. Bless this. Pray for missionaries. If you want to spend some time praying for missionaries, we've got some information about countries and places that we support along the side of the stage that you can look over and pray. Because sometimes people don't pray because they don't know what to pray.